Hi guys, my name's Andre Pete. I am the owner and sole proprietor of the library Cichlids. A few friends of mine actually asked me to do a video for you to talk about specifically color. Before we get to the meat of the subject, I'm just going to tell you guys a little bit of my background really fast, why I'm qualified to talk about this video. I have been in aquatics since I could barely walk. My grandfather had me working in live bearers, picking breeders before I was even the age of 10. And then throughout my life, it was pretty much a hobby for me. Kept nano tanks, did beta, all sorts of stuff. And then as an adult, I bought my own house. And once I did, I started getting really heavy into African cichlids. For quite a while now, I've actually had an exorbitant number of tanks, species, etc. Was trained by some of the old guard in the industry. And so now I'm actually a licensed aquaculture facility. I'm in North Orlando, Florida. I'm inspected by the state every 6 months. They come on my property, they go through all of my rooms and my greenhouses, check out everything, make sure I'm using best management practices, etc., etc. So thoroughly qualified at this point in aquaculture, but also I have a background specifically in art and lighting. Went to college and was trained specifically in lighting design, also was heavily in art and all of that. So I'm qualified to talk about what we are going to work with today specifically. I mean, I'm versed in everything else, including genetics, breeding, whatever, raising, but specifically this topic is one of the ones that I have really focused in on, done the research, worked on how to combine certain aspects and traits of the different fish, specifically from Lake Malawi, in order to produce the effects that we want to see. So all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. And then I'm going to try and keep this video short, and I'll get kind of in depth more later on and do some other videos for you guys talking about color and specifically how to achieve certain results. But first of all, I'm going to kind of blow your minds a little bit, because when it comes to color of the fish, the cichlids of Lake Malawi, we have what's called a visual presentation. It's what is expressed and what we see the fish to appear as, what their visual result is. But going into that, there's actually quite a bit that is in play. So for example, you have light as well as color, and how those two things work together achieve the end effect. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and probably make a few of you turn your head to the side a little bit by saying there is no such thing as the color blue in pigment in Lake Malawi. And that's pretty wild, because a lot of the fish look blue. So that being said, what causes that? How do we get that visualization? Well, that's what we're going to talk about right now. So first of all, the pigments of Lake Malawi include yellow, black, and red. And the cells that carry these pigments are known as xanthophores for yellow, melanophores for black, and erythrophores for red. And these things play in combination. Also, how they play in combination affects the end result of what things look like. Just like a painter combining color on a palette and then applying it to a canvas, we do the same thing with genetics when it comes to combining fish that have the correct traits to give a certain expression. Now, granted, this is a lot more in play when we're talking about guys that are working heavy in hybrids. When it comes to the pure strains, everything's kind of more set, and it's just at this point important to understand how those things came to be. As far as pushing a species that's pure forward, there's a lot less work insofar as color goes than with the guys that are maybe making hybridized fish, and I do some of that myself. Now, when we're talking about a fish's skin, let's turn that to black. When we're talking about the skin layer on a fish, we have the dermal layer, okay? But that is comprised of multiple layers, and each layer possesses different aspects of pigment, okay? And the three colors of pigment can be expressed in more than one layer, but they are typically going to be expressed in either layer 1 or layer 2, as I refer to it. This is how in my brain it works. This is not necessarily something you're going to find documented. Layer 3, however, this is where the scale layer exists, and this is where we are going to see light affecting the color of the fish. This is where we see iridophores. And iridophores are something completely different from xanthophores, melanophores, and erythrophores. Whereas those are purely pigment, iridophores are actually reflective cells. So although they do produce a color effect, they are actually light-bending cells. Iridophore, as in iridescent, they create a sheen. And everybody knows, if you've seen any fish from Lake Malawi, they have a definite sheen. And usually it's when you're looking at very blue fish. You won't look at a red fish and find that the red color itself appears to shimmer. The red is like matte. Yellow color, it's typically matte, unless it is on a silver-sided fish, perhaps one of the common haps. We can talk kind of about that a little bit later. But for now, let's focus on what we're talking about here. As far as iridophores go, they are a light-bending cell, and they exist in the scale layer, the outermost layer. So here's the important thing to understand. The reason why the majority of the fish in Lake Malawi, the vast majority, definitely more than 50%, do appear blue is because in their lower dermal layers, they possess melanin, okay? So let's take, for example, fryer eye, Cyanochromis fryer eye. If we are talking about them, they have a heavy amount of melanophores in the deeper dermal layers. Now, what happens is you have iridophores on top. Now, here's the important thing to understand about iridophores. Iridophores bend and reflect light, specifically light within the blue spectrum. So, when we're talking about pigment, let's go back to art class, years ago. When we're talking about pigment specifically, all pigments are a combination of red, yellow, and blue, right? So red, yellow, and blue to create pigment. In art, when we're talking about art, this is just to get y'all to grasp the concept a little bit. So that being said, it's red, yellow, and blue. When we're talking about light, it's red, green, and blue. And you mix red, green, and blue to a white light effect. Now, the iridophores specifically reflect light in the blue spectrum, okay? So what we're seeing is like this white powder blue color being reflected, then backed by the black. And so it makes iceberg fryer eye look electric blue with a white iceberg on top in that case. If it's standard fryer eye, of course, they won't have the white on top. And here's the interesting thing, and the reason why I'm talking about the iceberg now is because the blaze on top is, in effect, a loss of melanin just in the top of that body, and a heavier concentration of iridophores that develop as well. And you'll notice that that's only in dominance. Like if you have an iceberg fryer eye that gets beaten up, their expression of melanin, and we know this, like the fish, depending on stress levels and whatnot, they can turn melanin off and they'll look almost ghost white in the case of certain fish when we go to ship them or when they're received. You take them out of the box, they look really pale. You put them in the tank, wait till the next day, oh, they got all kind of color. That's how this kind of thing works, just like octopi and all kind of other stuff. Some of these pigment cells can be turned on and off. The one thing that can't be turned on and off is in this outermost layer, the iridophores, because they're reflective and they have nothing to do with how the fish feels. It's just how it is. It's kind of like fingernails. You can't change the color of your fingernails without actually painting them. So regardless of how you feel, your fingernails are going to be the same color. The same holds true with the scales of a fish, and that is where iridophores are held in the fish's body, in that outermost layer right next to the cells covering the pigment cells. So what happens, as I said, is you get an effect of that reflection on top of pigment to combine for a color. Now this is interesting because this happens somewhere else in nature as well. When we talk about blue jays also possess iridophores in their feathers. They possess no cyanophores whatsoever. There is no pigment of blue in a blue jay. It's all reflective light covering melanistic pigment. Same exact same thing as an iceberg fryer eye or a standard fryer eye. You put those iridophores on top of melanophores and you get the effect of a deep, gorgeous blue. So all that being said, in this first video, that's really what I wanted to cover, talking about how pigment is expressed in Lake Malawi fish. Now granted, we do get every single color in the rainbow in Malawi fish, but how all of the different things are combined is very important. And also, certain pigments are much more dominant than others. Now, of course, black is one of the most dominant, or melanin is one of the most dominant pigments in Lake Malawi. And then having the expression of iridophores on top gives us the blue effect. But we also have plenty of fish that possess yellow and a very few that possess red. Now, that is because yellow is a much more dominant expression trait in the Malawi fish than red is. So in the case of, say, the hybrid firefish, firefish specifically were created in Germany. They were created by crossing Anastere umbuna, which is technically a level of leucism or a loss of melanin, crossing that to a Hansbanshee red shoulder, which of course is a blue fish with a reddish shoulder, one of the few fish in Lake Malawi that actually possesses true red. Now, that being said, they ended up with a resulting fish that appeared leucistic, so no melanin, and orange in color. And here and there they would get some that were red. They labeled those specific ones, not this whole strain, just those specific individuals, dragon bloods, okay? And one of the reasons that dragon bloods and firefish get mixed up, especially in the United States, is because probably somebody got their hands on some that were specific dragon bloods and called all the offspring that. That's not how that works. How it works is the hybrid strain is firefish, and the red ones specifically are dragon blood. And the way you get that is by having more erythrophores than xanthophores. And of course, it was hard to get that because erythrophores are less dominant than xanthophores. So to get that effect, you actually have to have more of the red pigment and at the same time less of the yellow pigment. So in order to breed towards red, you're actually working an uphill battle that's very difficult because you're trying to increase pigment the entire time, but you're trying to only increase a recessive pigment. So what we're in effect doing is having to do double duty in order to push towards that red and away from the yellow. Simultaneously, a lot of people want ones that are more red on the body than having, like, say, the gems or the white color or coming out pink, which results from having a lot of iridophores in that outermost dermal layer that are reflective, creating that effect of a lighter colored fish. So now, in the case of ones where we're trying to produce a more solidly colored red body that is becoming very popular these days, we actually have a triple duty. We have to breed away from xanthophores towards erythrophores as well as away from iridophores. 3 different traits that we're actually trying to control. And the only one that we have a really firm control on because of all the line breeding is the melanophores. I mean, you'll still get some throwbacks, some blue dragon bloods, which obviously look close to Hansbanshee red shoulder because that's what was originally bred for them. But that's well under control from the line breeding. Having all those other things flying around, though, can be difficult. And one of the reasons it is difficult is because cichlids, unlike most other fish families, actually possess 2 more sets. In other words, like most fish have a set number of genetic alleles. Cichlids actually have double the number of alleles. So it's not only that you're dealing with what the fish looks like and what could possibly be in their background, but also double that. And in order to wrangle all that together, it does get very difficult. Now, as far as today, I don't really want to go too much further than this. Any of you guys that see this video, you're welcome to reach out to me. Again, when we're talking about this kind of stuff, it does get very complex. And as far as this kind of subject goes, I definitely want to get more in depth with it, talk to you guys about it, and flesh it out. But for today, I think I've probably taken up a lot of people's time enough. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it here, and then I'm going to move on to a more in-depth explanation of this in some subsequent videos. But I do hope that you have enjoyed this. Check this out if y'all have seen any of the videos Daniel Cassingham has been putting out lately regarding genetics and whatnot. If you start looking at that and start listening to this kind of stuff as well, you're kind of get together a basis of understanding of what we're trying to give you guys informationally as far as putting stuff together and being able to select breeding stock, as well as looking at things from a perspective of if you're breeding a pure breeding stock versus a hybrid. So I hope this is helpful today, and you guys have a good one.